WDKN.com.
I love listening to it over and over. I love it.
This is 101.5 The One and WDK. Streaming online at WDKN.com.
I love listening to it over and over. I love it.
This is 101.5 The One and WDKN, Dixon's Country Music Home.
You're listening to The Old Timer Show, presented by RFC Broadband on Dixon's only live and local station, 101.5 The One and WDKN. Now, here's your host.
Good morning, Dixon County. It's Saturday, March the 5th, and you are listening to the Old Timers program here on WDKN, AM 1260 and FM 101.5. We are also streaming at WDKN.com. I'm your host, Justin Spurlock, and today we have a great show for you. We've got SuEllen Westerman here today to talk to us and tell us a little bit about her life. She grew up in Charlotte. She was involved in the school system, and we're just so honored that she's here today to talk with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Fairly well for an old lady, I guess.
Well, I appreciate you talking to me today.
Well, I'm glad to do it.
And helping me make this radio show. It'll be fun.
Okay.
Well, first off, let's tell the people your name.
SuEllen Webster Westerman.
And tell us a little bit about your early life and where you grew up.
Well, I was born and raised in Nashville until my daddy was called to preach. And he worked for a Nashville Machine Company. And so we lived out in East Nashville, and I went to church at Eastern Baptist Church. That's a big brick church is still there, I think. And I went to school, elementary school there, and then back then we had low first and high first. The grades were like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be 6 before you started school. So I won 6th of December. So I had to start school my first half of first grade in January, which messed you up later on, because you had low first and high first and all this stuff. So there was a lady there that had a private school. So Mother and Dad sent me to her for a half a year, and I made up a year and a half so I could get back to going in the fall and spring to school. So I went to school there. Went to church at Eastern Baptist, and then my dad was called to preach, and so he took church in East Tennessee. And so, and then he preached at Charlotte, built that church up on the hill, First Baptist Church in Charlotte. We had the first tent meeting there. And I don't know where you know Jerry, but Jerry was a man that lived there close by, and he was a janitor at the school, and he is a buddy of my daddy's, so he helped Daddy all the time. I'll tell you this funny story. One time we had the tent meeting going on, and a dog got in there. And Daddy said, Jerry, get the dog out. Jerry whistled and did everything he could to get the dog out. The dog wouldn't go out. So he picked him up with the neck and the tail and picked him up and loudly announced, if I ditch you out one way, I'll ditch you out another. And out he went with the dog. So we lived there in the back of that church for a while. And after we came to Charlotte, and he became pastor at Sylvia here. And then in 1950, May, I graduated from high school. And in June, I got married, 1950.
And tell me, where did you go to high school?
I went to Clarksville. I was going to Donaldson, and I was taking Latin. Well, back then, if you took Latin, you had to take 2 years of Latin to get the credit for it. But they let me just take 1 year, but we were living in Charlotte in that church and built it back. And I rode the bus, or they took me one, over my grandmother's estate during the week and went over there to school. Clarksville, and to finish that half a year so I could get back in line. Then I came back to Charlotte, and I graduated to Charlotte. And
What was Charlotte like when you first got there? What were some of the buildings that were there? Maybe some of the businesses. What was Charlotte like?
okay, there was a hardware store. I've forgotten his name. I know it. And some of the same buildings. Somebody's cleaned it all up, I think, but same buildings are there now. And the Charlotte Church, when we first started having church, where the post office is was the restaurant. And the restaurants were not open on Sunday, if you don't remember that day, but you didn't sell stuff much on Sunday. So I had a friend that worked in the restaurant, and I would go down to the back door and she'd slip me out pie and cake, And that restaurant was there, next door to it was a drugstore. I can't remember the man's name. He was an older gentleman, and I worked for him when I was 13 in the drugstore. And then later, Elliot was a pharmacist, and Dr. Elliot had an office up the hill. And it was nice town, nice people. I mean, we mixed up going to church. My dad was a Baptist preacher, and a friend named Billy Anderson. We were friends, not dating anything. And we would go to church on Sunday night. And we go one week at my church, and next week he was the church class. Next week we go to his church and walk to church. Of course, you could then. And had several girlfriends that lived around there. And we would walk down at night. If you know what the courthouse has, that little low stone fence, well, not a fence. Mm-hmm. We go down at night and sit on that place and sing, because nobody's in town at night, no stores or anything like that. So we just walk down there and sit there and sing, talk.
What would you sing? What songs?
Just, I don't know, whatever was going on. I
Just
guess.
whatever song was popular at the time, huh? So what was it like? You said that you got your first job working there when you were 13. What exactly did you do there at the store?
Just see his drugstore and sold stuff in there just like they do now. And then later on, the Elliots had the drugstore. And I cannot remember this little man's name. He was the older man, a gray-headed man that worked there then. And then the Elliots came in, and Bill Elliott, Bill and Betty Jo. His wife was Betty Jo Elliott, and she was a teacher. And right now, she can't go anywhere. She lives outside of Charlotte. She remembers everybody's birthday. I get a birthday card from her every year.
She's got a good memory, huh?
Oh, boy. Well, got them all written down. Anyway, then her husband died, of course, and there was a Dr. Elliott that had his office. So all Ken the Elliots had his office right up the road there. And
let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back and talk some more with Miss Ida SuEllen Westerman right here on the Old Timer Show on WDKN.
Let's talk about your internet options in this area: cable internet, cell phone internet, and the phone company. Does that cover it? And not everybody has all three options. So if you're looking to make a change, try RFC Broadband, a local business right here in Dixon, offering the speeds you need at prices you can afford with no data caps. 615-375-8662 or rfcbroadband.com.
In times of joy, in moments of grief, broadcasters come through, even when all else fails. Today, with more ways than ever to experience the moments that transform our lives, Americans still choose broadcast radio and television more than all other media combined. We are the local broadcasters of radio and television, reaching more people, touching more lives. Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
And we're back here on the Old Timers program here on WDKN. We are here this morning talking to Ida SuEllen Westerman. And tell me a little bit more about what it was like growing up in Charlotte, what Charlotte was like back then.
it's a close-knit community. I mean, everybody helped everybody out with everything. And like I said, when Daddy got ready to build that building, that people came in and helped. One of his first members was Mr. Caleb Pfizer. Mr. Caleb Pfizer made his living gambling. Made a pretty good living. And his daughter comes to see me some, and she was little then when they went to Church of Charlotte, so she never did know he was a gambler. Never told. I told her. But he made plenty of money, but he helped my daddy out so much, and Daddy bought land on up the road going towards Sylvia and built a house there. And I know Mr. Caleb, when we moved, he bought the land for my daddy when Daddy moved to East Tennessee. So he passed that church, the one at Charlotte, the one at Sylvia, alternating the services, morning at one church, and next Sunday morning the other church, and then night service. Wow. And then before we moved from Nashville, we lived out there. Nashville, and he would preach at Nashville, and then we'd drive to Charlotte, and he brought me with him because I could play the piano.
Oh, wow. You could play the piano, huh?
And he would come down here and have service in that restaurant at Charlotte before they ever had a church. Then go back and have church in Nashville again. And he preached on the river in Nashville.
Really?
They had a boat that was tied on the riverbank, and he'd carry me in that little folding wagon, and we'd have people live down that river back there in Nashville then, had little old shanty kind of houses, and these people all come to church in that riverboat, and it sat on the water so it rocked.
Wow. I bet that was an interesting church service to be a part of.
Rocking, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But so he was a busy man, and then they moved to East Tennessee, and I stayed here, of course, because I was married.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of babysitting back in those days.
Tell me a little bit about, so you said you graduated high school from Charlotte around 1950, and then you immediately got married. Is that right?
I graduated in May and got married in June.
Tell me a little bit about that. What was that like? That was an exciting couple of months.
My husband was about 6 years older than me, and he farmed, and he had quit school. He didn't finish high school because I'll tell you really why. I think his parents were afraid they were going to draft him in the Army, and they needed him on the farm, which happened a lot then, I guess. And so he quit school and never did get his high school diploma. And when I talked about going to college, he wasn't very pleased about that because I was younger than him, and he was afraid I'd meet somebody young. But I was going to start in January. In December, on Christmas tree was in that living room, and there was a $100 bill on the Christmas tree. And that was his signal, I think, that it was okay for me to go to school.
So you went to Austin Peay. Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit about that. What was that like?
Well, it's a long drive.
So you drive up there?
Well, no, I usually rode Noah Daniel.
Uh-huh.
And she was in school over there then, too. I rode with them a lot. And then I had a nephew who has both legs and one arm missing because he got burned when he was a baby. And he stayed here one summer, and he rode to school with somebody over at Austin Peay, and he had a co-cadet over there. Then he went around campus then. And so he lived here for that summer. But sometimes we'd get, Noah would carry us if it's bad weather, but if it's out of school, but I drove and kept going. I liked college. So I kept going. The school wanted me to get the degree in counseling, which I did, the school system, because they didn't have guidance counselors back then. So I was the counselor.
So did you decide to get involved with the schools and become a school counselor while you were there, or did you decide that before you got to Austin Peay?
Then they needed a school psychologist in the county, so I took one. They paid for me to take one class at Austin Peay. The school system paid for one. So I started getting, I had the bachelor's already then. So I got master's in counseling, master in education, EDS. And when I got do the EDS stuff, I decided I wasn't going any further because I had to write a big paper.
That was enough, huh? Sounds like you were in school for a while.
And I had some good teachers that also be. Dr. Beth Stokes was wonderful. And Dr. Wood was the math teacher. And Darnell probably wouldn't mind me telling you, I won't tell you everything. Darnell Collier was one of my students, and he wasn't really interested in math so much. But Dr. Woodward came over and did a session of one of our classes of games. And that motivated that student, and boy, he got interested in math. And he started making good grades in math. And we talked about Andy was so smart, I just had to give him the book and let him do it himself. I had some smart students. When I taught first grade, I had about 6 or 7 really, really bright, gifted kids. And, you know, and I had one little boy that cried every day. And every day my pattern was, we could do that now, but we had scripture reading or Bible story and prayer and sang every day at the beginning, first grade. Well, this little boy loved to sing. And he came to school there in first grade. He had some cousins. And these girl cousins would come down there and check on him every morning. And I finally had to stop them from coming. So he started crying when he walked in the door. So I had to sit over to the side. And if he could cry, he could sit out front and sing with everybody. So that kind of cured his crying. But we had a good time. Of course, first time I walked in, the first class I taught was 6th grade also at Charlotte. And when I walked in that room, it was full of students, more students than chairs.
Wow.
I don't know, must have been 40-something of them, but they found it lined up. But that picture I counted, I had 30 students. Now they're down to, what, 20?
Yeah, between 20 and 30 is an average class size, maybe around 30. Some of the bigger classes might have.
So I taught 6th grade, and then I taught, when they had started having different classes, I just taught math and English for 7th, 8th grade. And then I went to 1st grade.
It's a big difference.
Big difference is right, really. But I liked them all. I mean, I love children, I love teaching, and so I kept teaching. Then I got into counseling and did that for 20 years. And put Tommy Marvin at Taylor Funeral Home. And now somebody else has to do it.
Yeah. Well, you did a lot of things for the school system for a really long time.
And I worked for the state some.
Oh, you did?
When they came up with career ladder. You ever hear of career ladder?
A little bit, yeah.
All right, I worked for the state as a career ladder evaluator. And at that time, there was a team of 3 that had to go observe and evaluate the teachers, and then their local supervisor. And then we all had to go back and meet to come up with a score for the teachers. And there was only one team in Tennessee. So we covered the state. And I was so glad I had that thing on my band so I could talk to people on the road. Because it was a boring, I mean, you had to go way up to East Tennessee and Memphis and way up everywhere else. You had to go all over the state and meet. You had to go observe that person. Then you had to go back and meet with them. And the meeting, you had to go at the same place as for an hour meeting. And a lot of times I took all my grandchildren with me for that 1 hour meeting.
What was Dixon like back then? We talked a little bit about Charlotte earlier. What was Dixon like in those days?
Of course, it didn't have as many businesses as it has now, or restaurants. They had around the corner where that bank is now, down at the railroad, there was a sweet shop. I'm trying to think what they called it. Anyway, they sold hamburgers and stuff. And we didn't eat out back in those days. I mean, you didn't go out to eat. My mother had always had a big Sunday dinner cooked for whoever wanted to come home with us from church. And I remember Daddy telling people at Sylvia one time that there was somebody complained about the store being open on Sunday. And Daddy told them from the pulpit, I think, if you didn't stop there and buy bread and stuff on Sunday after lunch, they wouldn't be open.
That's true.
He was real fanatic about it. He would not buy anything on Sunday. I mean, if Mama's out of bread, tough luck, or out of anything else, you don't buy anything on Sunday. So we surely never went to the store, and they always filled up with gas Saturday night. And people don't think anything about shopping on Sunday now, but you didn't shop much on Sunday then.
Well, I can tell you this. He'd probably be proud to know that most of the businesses, and not all of them, but most of the businesses in downtown Dixon are still closed on Sunday.
Right.
Most.
Right. Mm-hmm,
most, especially the ones that have been there for a long time.
And this was mostly a little small, like a neighborhood guy that owned the stores down at Silver, not the big businesses. Of course, we didn't go shopping any of those either, and my mother made all my clothes, so I didn't go shopping for clothes.
Not like they do now, right? That's
No.
one of the, I think, favorite things to go shopping for these days is clothes.
I guess so.
But I guess you didn't do that much, huh?
No. We would go to Nashville. When we lived in Nashville, we'd go down, Church Street where all the stores, and look in the window. And if I saw a dress I liked, Mother'd come home and draw it out on brown paper and make her pattern and make it, And I learned to do some. I made a suit one time, I think, but I didn't get into too much of that. She did a lot of it. And
Sounds like she was pretty talented when it came to that.
right, she was, and she was a worker.
We're here this morning talking with Miss Ida SuEllen Westerman. We're going to take a short break here on the Old Timers program, and we'll be right back to wrap things up here on WDKN.
Let's talk about your internet options in this area: cable internet, cell phone internet, and the phone company. Does that cover it? And not everybody has all three options. So if you're looking to make a change, try RFC Broadband, a local business right here in Dixon, offering the speeds you need at prices you can afford with no data caps. 615-375-8662 or rfcbroadband.com.
In times of joy, in moments of grief, broadcasters come through, even when all else fails. Today, with more ways than ever to experience the moments that transform our lives, Americans still choose broadcast radio and television more than all other media combined. We are the local broadcasters of radio and television, reaching more people, touching more lives. Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
And we're back here on the Old Timers program. We've got a few more minutes here. I wanted to ask you real quick. We're here with Miss Ida SuEllen Westerman, and she's been talking about some of the students that she worked with in the past, and I was just wondering if you got a chance to see them or talk to them.
And not many of my students that I know, I see things on Facebook where some post things and so forth, but you don't keep in contact with them. You get this over with.
I think it is fun, though, to sort of see some of your students.
Well, we had class reunions for a while. It wasn't for high school. Bill Coyle was my principal at Charlotte, and he's gone now. And Patsy, he married Patsy that lived right in that Patsy Curtis, his second marriage, but he got up a class reunion that we met for a while, several years at the restaurant is gone there in Dixon, and we met the first Saturday of the month of October, so everybody knew when it was. Didn't have to send out notices and so forth. Graduating class, and but we don't do that anymore. Nobody. I think the last time we met, there might just been 8 actual students.
Really?
And of course, some lived off Nashville and everywhere then too. Didn't all live here. And for a while, we had a class reunion for my grade school in Nashville at a restaurant. And they stopped having that too.
I bet that was fun though, getting to see people at those reunions. That's always been real enjoyable, I think, for people to go back.
People back.
Go
It
back.
is. It's good to see. And it's good to hear from my students. Sometimes I hear something from one, but it's been a while.
After you retired, did you see them when you were out, running around town and things like that? Did you run into students
Maybe
often?
some, I guess, yeah. And then I did counseling for Taylor Funeral, so I did those groups, and we used the bank. For years, we met upstairs at the bank, and I don't know who he was. I wish I could remember names, but back then the bank closed at 12, but the banks were open in the morning. And so they let me use the room upstairs for my grief support group. And that's where we met. And the bank closed, and we met at 12 o'clock. And one of the men of the bank would stay there till we got through our group so he could let me out, lock the bank back, and leave home. So he sacrificed an hour every Saturday. That was very nice. People have been good to me. And they let me do, like my bosses. I've never had a boss that told me what to do.
Not a lot of people can say that. I think you've been pretty lucky.
I think I have too. I've never had a bad boss. Ruth Emma Wharf was the special ed director, and I worked under her part-time, and part-time under Mr. Bennett.
I've heard of Miss Wharf
Yeah.
before.
Sweetheart. She's only special ed supervisor, I guess we have. Her husband, Donald, is still living. I check on him. He called me the other day. But she was good. She did a good job with special ed programming. And Mr. Bennett was over the Chapter 1 of Title I program.
For a time, I believe the school there was named the Wharf School. Mm-hmm. And I think it was named in her honor. Mm-hmm. So she must have been a pretty good educator.
Yeah, that's where her office was at that time. Mm-hmm. Started out in the little house. I don't remember seeing that house down from Charlotte Elementary School, just a residential house. Mm-hmm. It's gone now. Somebody's bought it and moved it. It's down the road. Somebody moved that house. I don't know. And that's where we had our office. Her office was in there. My office was there. And the lady that helped me out, my helper, was in there. And I had the play therapy in there, where Mr. Sullivan wanted to know if I was raising cats. And then Sarah Caudill's office was there at one time.
Now tell me that story about the sandbox, because you told me before the show started, but I want to make sure we get that on the air. So
well,
you had created something in your office there.
I did. Like I said, you know what to do it. That's what I was always told. So I did a lot of reading on play therapy. And I decided I would do play therapy for the children in the Title I reading program. They were having trouble reading. And so I scheduled them to come, and Wilma Story drove and picked them up. So she'd bring me 6 children. That room in the front was a big, big room. And I had a sandbox that the maintenance men had made for me. Fred and Floyd had made me a sandbox. Built it with Sam. And so I had a sandbox in there, and I had easels for they could paint and draw and different things for them to do for play therapy. And so one day Mr. Sullivan came up there and saw that sandbox. Like I said, nobody knew what I was doing because they didn't tell me what to do. And I just did what I thought I needed to do. And so I had that play therapy room in that sandbox. It had seats at each end of it. And Mr. Sullivan didn't come to my office very much. I don't remember what he came for, but he came over there that day. And he walked in that room and he saw that sandbox. He said, "Sue, what are you doing, raising cats?" And I know he didn't, I knew, it wasn't the cleanest thing in the world because sand gets spilt out. So he never did come back and see my sandbox anymore.
Well, unfortunately, we're about out of time here on the Old Timers program. I want to thank you so much, Miss Ida SuEllen Westerman, for being on the show with us this morning. Dale Reagan is up next with his show, and I'll be back in 30 minutes with Mr. Tom Costa from Katie's Ice Cream on Know Your County. Stay tuned to WDKN.
When the way seems dark and long as I